I love this next media. It's a great conference, and I'm on the advisory board, and I think it's really important, a lot of things we discuss. But I do notice that sometimes I go to some of the panels, and you don't get enough time to ask questions. So I'm going to open the floor right now to questions. I know Amy, and they have some microphones. If you have one, please put your hand up. I'm going to continue. Oh, we have one right there. Let's just jump in with some questions. I have a few other questions myself, but it might be good to get some from the audience.
Hi. I know of at least one other service provider in Canada that does this.
Does what?
I'm going to tell you.
Okay,
Calm
sorry,
down.
sorry.
Calm down.
Whoa, tough crowd. Okay.
I have a friend that works for a different service provider than Rogers, and he says that
Bell.
No.
Okay.
And he says
Shaw.
that they... stop it!
Okay, sorry.
And he says that they sort of under the radar filter or cramp down on bandwidth used for torrents. And I want to know how, Eric, how you see this as a roadblock, and how maybe you could, how do you think that you could market yourself so that companies don't actually do this?
Well, I touched on it earlier. We think so there may be many motivations for this, right? So if you think about Rogers, for example, they may see BitTorrent not only as a CapEx driver, but potentially a competition as well, right? Cord cutters may get all of their content from the internet someday. There goes the subscription business. So there have been a lot of concerns, and this was all a buzz in the U.S. Just a year and a half ago, I think. I'm losing track of time, but in front of the FCC, where there was a gigantic network neutrality debate centered on Comcast for doing this very thing. And I personally testified in front of the FCC, and we had all kinds of fun with this one. But at the end of the day, the FCC ruled that the internet should be neutral, and that service providers shouldn't, whether it's anti-competitive or not, and they didn't dare draw the distinction that what Comcast was doing was in fact anti-competitive. They ruled, at least in the States, that regulation should be in line with the neutral internet. Now the CRTC here in Canada, I think, has also faced this question, and I believe ruled somewhat differently. So this does vary jurisdiction by jurisdiction, and shaping is a very real concern. So we don't see the answer in regulation. We don't see the answer in government, despite what may be a Pyrrhic victory, at least for us in the U.S. Government isn't the answer, and we instead, being smart technology guys, said, how can we solve this for ISPs? And that was the little bit that I talked about earlier, where we reinvented the transport to be friendly. And if the rationale for shaping isn't competitive, isn't because I don't want you to cancel your subscription, it's in fact because it's killing my CapEx. This technical solution solves that problem, that technical problem. In essence, the ISP business is cyclical, like the cell phone business or any other service provider business. If you use something at peak, it costs a lot because you have to pay to upgrade the bottleneck. But if you use something in the valley, it costs you zero. That's the nature of fixed cost business models. So by shifting the traffic around and using it only in the valleys and reserving the peaks for other uses, we in essence cost the ISPs nothing. And that's what this transport is designed to do, to basically use idle bytes on the network, and those idle bytes are free. It should evade any rational excuse for shaping BitTorrent traffic.
But in Canada, we do shape.
Yes, quite extensively.
Yeah,
actually.
and it's now, Dave, maybe you can speak a bit to it, about how there's a lot of shaping going on in Canada, and it's out in the open, and Bell's been talking about it, and I'm not sure how Rogers has weighed in on it, but I know when I come back here and I try to use BitTorrent at certain times in the day, generally when people are watching TV, I can't, my traffic slows right down. There's actually a Google map that shows all of Southern Ontario and when the traffic drops and and it's all to do with television. Yeah. So,
where I focus is I'm not on the transport side of the ISP business. I'm not modeling our network, but where I focus is how can I get 80% or the 20% of content that people really want to watch that represents 80% of what they're downloading online closer to the customer. So my idea of traffic shaping, if you will, is to build out this content distribution network, maybe work with Eric, maybe not, and get that content cached closer to the customer. And so we're at Rogers, what we're doing with this broadband video service is partnering with the studios, the networks, the broadcasters, and working so that by, certainly this time next year, but hopefully by the fall, we would have a really robust service in the Canadian marketplace that was a mixture of both free and subscription content, ad-supported, that was cached close to the customer. And there's a couple benefits you get with that. One, we should be able to help the broadcasters and the programmers in terms of advanced advertising platforms, and that will be good for them. We should be able to take their transport costs down to zero. That will be good for them. And we should be able to, I think, guarantee a better quality of service, not because we're going to throttle the network, but because if I equate it to driving 8 minutes to the office or 8 hours to Ottawa, the likelihood of me encountering a traffic jam or having a flat tire or some sort of impediment driving 8 hours to Ottawa is exponentially greater than 8 minutes to the office. So if I can keep that content closer to the customer, it's going to do, I think, a world of good in terms of better quality of service. So that's where I'm focused, and that's where Rogers wants to work. And what we're actively soliciting and trying to drive is studio and broadcaster and specialty channel participation, because, well, I maybe unfairly paint Eric out to be the boogeyman. The reality is this customer need in terms of being able to watch content at a time and place of their choosing is not going away. In fact, how many people here have a PVR at their home? And how many people have been driving in their car, listening to the radio, and tried to rewind the radio? Because, experiences that you experience on one platform affect the way you consume media on another platform. So this notion of non-linear is not going away. It's rooted in a fundamental customer need.